All right, let's bring in another of our guests, Dr. Sabastine Okeke, who is a labor and human resource expert. Of course, he's been listening to our discussions both with the IOM mission director and, of course, to Mr. Odemge here in the studio. Well, we would like Mr. Okeke to now focus on jobs. How jobs have been lost and gained during this period. Mr. Okeke, you with us now?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. We spoke earlier on about how Nigerians who have migrated to other parts of the world have had to cope with the fallout of the pandemic. But conversely, there are also expatriates who operate in Nigeria. How have those expatriates been faring as far as jobs are concerned in Nigeria? Have there been any losses? Are you aware?
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. I think the issue about jobs in Nigeria has clear faces and direction. So prior to COVID, now during COVID. Okay, so and then we look at beyond expatriates, even local employees as well. What has happened to everyone? The fact remains that the entire world of work has been significantly disrupted by what is happening on account of COVID. So both the expatriates and those who are the locals are going through a transitioning program to reinvent and become relevant in the new world of work order, as it were. So, I mean, for most of the expatriates, their home countries have even called them back home. So, I mean, there were a lot of movements that happened. So they've moved homes back to their home countries. The fact remains that post-COVID, it is not a matter of the relevance of jobs. Is the job still relevant in the post-COVID era? Can the job be deployed via virtual platforms? So a lot of things will happen. So if, for instance, the nature of the job the expatriate have been doing locally can be deployed virtually, you may discover that some of the experts may not necessarily be deployed back physically, but the job could still be done wherever they are. So one of the things that COVID has done is to refine the way work is done. So it's not just about what work is, but how best can the work be done to deliver optimal value to both the employee and organization. So it's on both sides, both on the side of the expatriates, on the side of the locals, and on organizations. Everyone sits behind their tables to define what the job is and how best the job can be done to deliver value across board.
So that, of course, will take us to the whole question of developing new skill sets that fits into jobs that will be done post-COVID.
Absolutely. And it's so important that that this is properly identified. So from the United Nations, ILO says within the young people's population, about 1 out of every 6 young person has lost their job. This is ILO statistics in the COVID era. 1 out of every 6. Now, for a global population of about 7.8 billion, we have a youth population, a young people population of about 1.8 billion. So up to 7.8 billion young people in the classification of the ILO and the United Nations makes up about 1.8 billion. So the question is, 1 out of 6 of 1.8 gives you about 300 million job losses. That is statistical job losses, not necessarily actual or real. This is statistical job losses that has happened just within the COVID time. So if you connect that, to the numbers, and so, okay, so to what extent has that hit Nigeria? That means for Nigeria, based on the population of about 200 million people, we'll be talking of about 8.5 million fresh job losses on account of COVID. So the next phase will be, so how do we re-engineer a comeback to work? Prior to COVID, we had an unemployment situation. Now in COVID, we're talking about additional job losses. So how do we optimize opportunities? And I can tell you for free, the structures that will deliver that transformation or the transition is already existing in Nigeria. We don't need to create any new structures. We have existing structures that can just work together, collaborate together, and make it such that new skills are learned, digital capability is spread, and take advantage of virtual platforms, and we can have a quick response, a quick revert back to life. And the institutions to deliver that are already in Nigeria. Sweden is one, NGE is one, NYSC is one. If these three institutions can come together and build a collaboration to respond to COVID with the support of the organized private sector, we would come out of this COVID and feeling like it never happened. Because the response, the transition will be there. The Africa Development Bank had a portal on learning new job skills via virtual platform. They said within COVID time, the response, the visit, the registration on their own portal grew by 50%. 50% growth in the number of people across Africa and beyond who want to learn new skills, new technology-aided and digital-empowered skills to respond to job after COVID. So a lot of things are happening. Okay, so in some way, we could say that COVID was a hit. In some other way, COVID had been an eye-opener, a wake-up call to corporate to start redefining their jobs and the way they have structured the organization. COVID has enabled younger people to say, you know what, I could do more than I'm doing now. Even everyone is saying, I didn't know I could do this. So COVID has offered a new world of review, of asking questions. Wait a minute, I didn't know I could do this. Schools are now happening virtually. Some programs and courses that people never thought could be delivered virtually are happening live. World of work is amazing. Things are changing. Now, most of what people will have to do physically, now they realize that they can actually do it remotely. So there's a new way of responding to work. So new skills will be learned. You must have the skill set that enables you to respond to the demand of the time. It's no longer going to be business as usual or work as usual. Work is changing. And the guy in migration also pointed out to movement. Remember, at times, they connect to migration because there were shortfalls of labor in some other countries. So they opened up their doors to receiving new labor to come and fill up the gap. So if, for example, the country population required 5 million active labor force, for example, and locally they could produce only 3, they could raise 3 million. They needed 2 million extra labor to support the economy. So they opened up the doors of their country for migrants to come in. And so the migrants came in and occupied these other positions, and then the economy bubbled. Wait a minute. In COVID, a number of jobs were shut down. So for those countries that previously had a shortfall in labor requirement, they probably discovered they didn't have any shortfall now. So the need and the attraction for them to receive in migrants becomes almost near to zero. So you see them lock more of their doors against migrants. And then because the local people probably will end up having to look for job opportunities that may not be seemingly there, as it were. But of course, as COVID revolves, will be there. So for us as a country, the next plan will be, so how do we respond to this? We are dealing with labor, excess labor, as a matter of fact, prior to now. So now we have additional excess labor, and we have companies that are underproducing. So companies that are only producing at a certain level have dropped in terms of productivity. So the demand for labor is reducing, and there's a pressure. So there's still some demand for labor, but based on certain skill sets. So it is now about what kind of skill and what connect does your skill have to the nature of the work now that brings you to the table. So it's a huge responsibility. And I think, like I said, the country has the capacity to respond. We have institutions on ground. We just need a coordinating framework to respond as a country. A coordinating framework, not new institutions, not new laws, the ones we have, and coordinated properly would deliver a massive response as a country.
Okay, that of course takes us to the next issue, and which is how organizations, companies can and should respond to the current situation. Now, you realize that a number of companies, even in the developed economies, a number of organizations are folding up. I was watching a news report a few days ago in the US where a biscuit producer had to fold up because she could no longer cope. There are no customers and all of that. Some companies in Nigeria and elsewhere are also facing similar situations. There's a possibility that when all of this is over, they might not find it easy getting back in business. What should such organizations do in order to retain not just their clientele, but to retain even the production of whatever they have in the market, product they have in the market?
A good question would be, what will the market be looking for after now? we need to answer that question. So after COVID, what is the market looking for? If you look through COVID properly, COVID is beginning to redefine what market is looking for. So it is now important for every organization to look into the eyes of COVID and find out exactly what the consumers want, how they want it, and the measure, the framework, the structure of what they want. That is the first thing. So for every business that will be relevant post-COVID must have its relevance defined in COVID period. So the first thing that will happen is a proper strategic analysis of the nature of that business. What have we been doing? Why are we not doing anything now? What happened to our product? Is it that the products we have are not essential for the well-being of the people? Or is it that the consumers cannot afford? Is it that our product was overpriced? All of questions need to be answered. So the first thing is not to jump into conclusion of saying companies are folding up. Yes, they are folding up. Why? Because in the midst of the folding up, some businesses are booming. And some businesses came alive. So which means some businesses came up in COVID, some are booming in COVID. Of course, majority are folding up. So the question is, look at the product, look at the consumers, answer these questions. Were the product not essential to the well-being of the consumers? Were the product overpriced? Or is it that the products were essential, not overpriced, but the economic power of the consumers is affected? In which case, government intervention might be of help. And that is what you see in Europe, where the government came in to boost the capacity of the consumers to still buy by providing certain stimulus to make them have the capacity to buy. Now was to boost the purchasing power of the people. So which means it is not a case of the product being bad or a case of the cost of the product being high, but that the capacity of the buyer to buy has been significantly impaired by the realities of COVID. So the state came in and introduced direct to citizen stimulus, and were able to empower the purchasing power of the people. And in Nigeria, for example, the CBN also came in and tried to prevent the banks from laying off employees, because the government was trying to say, no, what we could help out. But that for me was like a law or a directive. The next question is, was it backed up with the capacity to be able to keep those employees? So those are part of the things that we need to be answering. How have we structured our economy? Do we have the back reserve to keep us going? Now, assuming the country shuts down or COVID shuts down the entire place for the next 6 months, do we have, as a people and as a country, do we have the capacity to keep on retaining people, supporting salaries? The public sector can still support salaries because some reserves were pumped in. The private sector, are they able to support salaries? These are realities. So the conversation must be holistic, not just segmented, but in all aspects of our economy, of our society. We should talk with everybody involved, significant representation, and come up with what exactly are we going to do to rebirth our economy post-COVID. The government is working very hard in terms of most of the policy I'm hearing, and in terms of initiative I'm hearing about great ideas. The next will be, to what extent are those things being put together able to reach the needed sector of the economy? Again, this economy is supposed to be built on the back of the small businesses, because they have the capacity in the trickles of 6 and 7 and 10 numbers of employees to boost employment opportunities across the country. So how well are we supporting that sector to deliver that capacity in a time like this? The bigger corporates may have a hit, but the hit may not last for a long time. They could survive quicker than the smaller businesses. So there must be a multi-dimension to the intervention. How do we protect the bigger businesses that they remain in the system and not go down? Number two, how do we enable the smaller and medium-sized businesses to make sure that they are still working? That's why I said we must have a connect with SMEDA. We must have a connect with the NYSC to keep on producing, to keep on resourcing our fresh graduates to be put into some of these smaller businesses, to supporting them so they can grow the next phase of our relevance into the post-COVID era. Number three, the director of employment must be there. So there must be a tripod, like a national tripod, and they will now have a coordinating official, a coordinating unit, working out to see how this integration work, so that we can have a saving framework that saves the big, the small, and the struggling. Everybody needs to be kept working. Everybody. So the state will come in direct to consumer stimulus, direct to citizen stimulus. That is what could work. That's number one. The businesses need some support. they can have access to funding, which is already being supported by the Bank of Industry, CBN, and some other ones. Great. But we must have a system that ensures that there's a proper profiling, there's a proper alignment to need, there's a proper identification of what is the overall benefit of this entity in the response to COVID. We must have a national response, and it must be integrated towards preserving jobs, preserving the economy, and growing the economy as well.
We don't have that national response policy right now, do we?
What I see is that we do have, from the voice I'm hearing from the office of the Vice President, we do have a national response framework. My question is, to what extent is that framework cascaded to the stretch of the national economic value chain? Because aside having corporate value chain, you have an economic value chain that delivers the stretch for the country. So that apart from creating wealth for the state, there's also keeping wealth in the hands of the citizens. So the stretch must be clear. Yes, we have a framework that the Vice President is coordinating. The next line is, to what extent have we resourced the team, and have we optimized the stretch, and have we engaged with people so that we can have a proper stretch? And that's why I feel that in that framework, we must include the Sweden team, must be there. We must include the NDE team, they should be there. We must include, surprisingly, the NYSC team, because every year the NYSC team harvests the best of our intelligentsia on a yearly basis. And then we preoccupy them with things that do not make them feel a sense of commitment to the nation. We need to start optimizing that NYSC and getting this best brain to sit behind some of these growing businesses funded by the state, because the salaries are going to be coming from the state, for the NYSC corpus, and then they can now be engaged properly. And then we can reskill, we focus, and redirect our energy towards revamping this economy. So my take is that we do have some form of voices we are hearing. Until the whole detail is probably put to the open, we will presume that what has been put together is sufficient enough to deliver what we are looking for. The point I'm making is that it must be total, it must be integrated, it must have relevance to the large corporates, to the mid-sized businesses and the smaller businesses, and sectoral. The farmlands, the agro businesses, the technology areas, the data. It's not a one hammer hit every nail solution. No. It must be specific customization of our intervention. So that framework must be unbundled and addressed towards the specific unit of each of the segments of the country. And I'm sure that's what I think they've done. If that's what they've done, then implementation is important and timing is important.
Okay.
It must be pushed.
Dr. Okeke, Dr. Okeke, please stay with us for a while. Let me turn to Mr. Odemige very quickly to respond to some of the issues that you have thrown up.
Yeah, I quite agree with the scenario he's painted in terms of the kind of partnership we need to move things forward. The only thing is the NYSC. We need to be more serious with the scheme, because it's a very transient thing.
But which is what he is suggesting.
Yeah. That
perhaps we need to turn that scheme around.
Yeah.
And during the 1 year service, retool these young men and women who are, as it were, the brain box of the nation.
No, we can only focus on those of them who have background, to do with agriculture or related occupation. The problem we have now is a lot of institutions see NYSC, as a burden. So most organizations reject. They are in the habit of rejecting, persons who are posted to them. That must change. We must be able to make sure that all those who have background in agriculture, we can give them a special dispensation. And what are they going to be doing? Something tells me that in the area of extension services is actually where we have a lot of problem in this country. So if we are going to get things right, we must bring in strategic institutions. Again, I go to Ilorin. There is this Agricultural and Rural Management Training Institute. You only need to see the range of training they provide. If state governments can actually do a deal with that institution, then we can have a greater impact of their work. You know, because there's the management dimension to all this. You can't just, farming is management, and there must be special skills that must go with that kind of management. So that's the point I'd like to make.
All right.
Yeah.
Dr. Okeke, on a final note, given all the recommendations you have made, let's look at the next, say, 3-4 months and hope that COVID-19 goes away, or that the world discovers or is able to develop a vaccine to stop it in its tracks. Now then what?
Let's trace back to history. 1918-19, there was the first major flu that hit the world. The effect of that flu did not last for 3 months. It lasted for almost 10 years. Because after the COVID will now be the recovering process and the timeline. That is where we must be deliberate about solutioning and fixing the problems. Number one, for jobs. Like I said, each business should use this time to ask those questions. If I'm losing customer and I'm losing patronage, what could be responsible? Is it the quality of my product, the relevance to the need of the people, or the pricing? And if none of them is on the negative, then we need to support the people to buy. That is number one. Number two, in terms of optimizing all these tripod institutions I talked about, it must be deliberate. So we need to boost the economy by reducing unemployment that will happen. There's already additional unemployment that is built on an existing unemployment. We need to have a way of clearing it off the table. The process to clear it off the table is what I said we need to be deliberate about. And that is, we need to identify that unit of the economy that can swap people, and that is the small, medium businesses. We need to get them, have an annual selection, a pool of 5,000 businesses selected through the SMIDAN collaboration, and then we'll put them on a pilot scheme over a 2-year period or whatever. And we fund them with coppers, not with money, with coppers that already paid. There's no need to put a copper where he's not needed. There are needs organizations that need to be identified, and they are protocol and they are followed through. And then they serve that period, we support that business for another tranche of coppers for 2 years, and they're ready to blight. They will add value to the economy. They will absorb some people that needs job, and the economy will be better. What I'm saying is that we need to be deliberate.
Okay.
So after COVID, this country will continue to move forward. New job skills will be gotten, but it must be such that you must have the capacity to be able to deliver your solutions even virtually or remotely as need be. You must know the skill set must change, the mindset must change. See, the mindset must change across every sector of this economy. Everyone must be aggressive, deliberate, and focused on getting the right thinking that will push us forward. And we should also look at some of the things the government are dealing with. I believe that inherent in what we have are our solutions that are covered with unnecessary argument. Let's unbundle the argument, identify the solutions, and deploy solutions, and move this country at a faster speed and move it forward. And the companies that need help should be supported as well, because it's important for this economy to do that. England supported companies. Germany did the same. America did the same. Every country is reaching out to support their businesses. We should support ours, not just with loans, but with even support that enables them to have some form of seed fund to revamp their business. But they must be profiled, they must be relevant to their future, and have the capacity to absorb the unemployed youths in our society.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabastine Okeke, Labor Human Resource Expert, joining us here on COVID-19 Watch. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.